Chris Jones gave me all the copies.
Okay, okay. Because I'm getting rid of mine because I don't think I'll ever read them. As much as I like want to read them, I would not officially have them.
It's slowly like but I love clean.
Oh
I
yay! Wait,
knew.
your uncle bought you a lighter.
No, I bought a copy in Lost City. I bought a copy from Lost City because I was very recently, and then I read it. Like I was just getting lost in the area, and I know the body loved it. And I was like, yeah, maybe it's something for me. I want to put a sign up here for my body.
No, just the pillars kind.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Politics and Prose Bookstore. My name is Mari Guzman, and I'm a bookseller here at Politics and Prose. We host a range of in-store and in-person events and classes and trips. But before we get started today, I'd like to ask you all to silence your cell phones so we don't disrupt the event. And when it comes time, please line up the microphone here to ask your questions for the Q&A. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Layla Martinez for her debut novel, Woodworm, which was translated from Spanish by Sophie Hughes and Annie McDermott and longlisted for the National Book Award in Translated Literature earlier this year. Tonight, Layla will be in conversation with Lily Meyer, our former events director at Politics and Prose, and also a translator, critic, and author herself, whose debut novel, Short War, came out in April of this year. Please join me in welcoming Layla Martinez and Lily Meyer.
All right. Welcome to DC, first of all. I'm sorry that you're here at just absolutely the worst time. I was saying to Layla before, I worked in events at P&P when Trump won the last time. So I feel a little bit, I feel doubly like I'm in a horror novel because something horrible has happened and my life has gone on loop. But I thought we could actually start by talking about horror. What is Woodworm a horror novel?
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for for the bookstore for having me here, and thank you to Lily for your work and your reading of the book and your questions. And yeah, I'm from Spain. This is my first time in the United States, and this week has been my first time doing this in English. So maybe I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes. And if you don't understand something, please ask and we repeat or say in Spanish or whatever. Yeah, why horror? I think horror is a very political genre. Maybe it's the most political genre, but sometimes it's coded. You have to decode the story and see what is behind the story. For example, with some years ago, I do a research about women who wrote horror stories in the 19th century. And all of them wrote haunted houses stories. And they were bourgeois women in that time, only bourgeois people wrote. And for me, what I found or what I believe is that they were saying that a house could be a dangerous place, no? That they were not safe in the houses, no? So we tend to think that houses are places to relax, to rest, places that we are safe in it, no? But this is not true for queer people. This is not true for women. For women, for example, because you have to work, no? You have to clean, do cooking, taking care of children, no? So it's not a place for relax. It's a place for work, and it's a place, and it could be also a dangerous place. And for the women of my family, it was a dangerous place. My great grandfather built the family house, as a wedding present for my great grandmother. And it sounds romantic. It's a romantic story, But he started mistreating my great-grandmother from the beginning. So the house was not a prison, but a trap. My great-grandmother was trapped in that house, and it was a horror story. So horror for me is the genre that fits better with this story of violence, of gender violence, of patriarchal violence, and also of class violence, because as a women, as a working class women, we not work only in our houses, but also in others people's houses. No? So the women in my family, a lot of women in my family has worked as maids. So they go to others people's houses to work there. No, so the house could be a place of class violence too, no? Because you are there, you live there, they live there with their bosses inside the house, and so the class violence is your reality. No, is you live, you are trapped also in your boss's house. No? And yeah, this is for me. This is a horror story.
Yeah. Well, it's very clear from the first page of the book that we are in a house where something is horrible and where something is horribly wrong. So I think before I ask you more questions, of which I have a million following up on what you just said, why don't you read us the beginning so that everyone can be
Okay.
in the house together, so to speak?
Yeah. I walked in, and the house pounced on me. It's always the same with this filthy pile of bricks. It leaps on whoever comes through the door and twists their guts till they can't even breathe. My mother used to say this house makes your teeth fall out and your insides rivel up. But my mother left a long time ago, and I don't remember her. I only know she said those things because my grandma told me. Though she shouldn't have bothered. It's not exactly news. In here, you lose your teeth, your hair, the meat from your bones, and if you are not careful, you'll end up dragging yourself around on all fours, or else permanently bedbound. I left my backpack on the wooden chest and opened the living room door. My grandma wasn't there. She wasn't in the pantry or under the kitchen table either, so I decided to try upstairs. I checked the dresser drawers and inside the wardrobe, but, but there was still no sign, damn her. Then I saw the tips of some shoes poking out from under one of the beds. I wouldn't normally have lifted the edge of the quilt. You don't disturb what's under the bed. But my grandma's shoes are unmistakable. The patent leather so shiny you can see your reflection in it from the other side of the room. When I lifted the quilt, she was staring at the slats under the mattress. A neighbor who once saw her climb out of the wooden chest by the front door told the journalist the old woman had dementia. But what would she know? That she'd storing bits with her fat friar hair. It wasn't dementia. I hauled the old woman out, sat her on the bed, and shook her by the shoulders. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, and this time it didn't. When it doesn't work, you are better off waiting for her to come around. I dragged her into the hallway, opened the door leading up to the attic, shoved her through, and closed it behind her, turning the key. All the doors in this house can be locked from the outside. It's a family tradition, like the stupid stuff people get up to at Christmas. We have a lot of traditions, including locking each other away, but we don't eat lamb because lambs have never done us any harm and it feels rude to eat them. I went down to fetch my backpack, then walked back upstairs. Aside from the stairway going up to the attic, the only space on the first floor is a bedroom I share with the old woman. I put the backpack on my bed, the smaller of the two. It used to be my mother's and before that my grandma's. In this house, you don't inherit money or gold rings or monogrammed sheet sets. Beds and bad blood are all the dead passed down. Rates and a place to lay your head. That's the most you'll be left around here. I didn't even get my grandma's hair. It's still as strong as rope, a real sight to behold when she lets it loose. And yet here I am with 4 greasy strands that start sticking to my scalp 2 hours after I washed them.
All right. You can clap. So tentative. Well, so first of all, obviously what you just read is your novel, Woodworm, but the words that you just read were written by your translators, Sophie, Hughes, and Annie McDermott, who are amazing translators. Check out their other work. But how does it feel to read your novel in another language?
It's very strange. This is the English translation is the only one that I can read because it's the only foreign language that I understand. Yeah, it's very strange because it's the same and not the same. But working with translators has been funny because the most of them have they have questions and they wrote emails to me asking questions, especially with oral language because the Spanish version is full of words that are from the oral language that in fact are mistakes in Spanish. This is very difficult for a translator because are only from that area of Spain. Other people in Spain from other areas don't know these words. So a translator is very difficult for them. But these questions are okay. This is normal, but there are other questions. For example, the Polish translator wanted to erase a sentence that said beautiful like a volcano. And she said to me that in Poland they are not going to understand this because volcanoes are not beautiful. And it was like, why volcanoes are not beautiful in Poland? Only in Poland. So, because other translators are okay with the sentence. And yeah, for example, the Arab translator asked me pictures of villages in Spain, but this is normal, no? The Arab translator is Egyptian, and in Egypt volcanoes are beautiful too. No, not in Poland, but in Egypt are okay with volcanoes. But yeah, and also I don't know other language. I don't know what they have done. A friend of mine, Cristina Morales, she has an incredible book translated to English, easy reading in English. And she discovered that some of the translations have softened the tone. No? So, for example, pussy was vagina. No? Tits, bread. No? And she was very angry because for her and for me too, this is censorship, no? Because you are changing the tone and you are changing what the characters are saying, no? And what the authors want and the author wanted to say in the novel, but I don't know if if the translators have done this to me. I'm not sure, not in English, but but I don't know in other languages. Yeah.
I can't. I'm so mad for Christina. That's such a terrible thing for a translator to do. But one thing that your translators did that I loved was they kept some of the Spanish that's especially important for the book's thinking about class. There's a bit where, so there are two narrators in Woodworm, the granddaughter who you heard, and then her grandmother, who in the passage Layla read was under the bed. She wakes up and starts narrating also. But there's a bit where the granddaughter she's thinking about how she says comio instead of comido, which is the proper pronunciation. And then she later hears the lady of the family she works for talking about how horrified she was when she heard her little son say comio. And the translators left that in Spanish, which I love because it gets right to the heart of language as expression of class and language as like a house, a site of class violence. I wonder if you could talk about how you thought about that when you were writing.
Yeah, it has to do with oral language, no? How the way we speak says a lot about us, no? About where are we from, but also about class. Because, for example, working class people speak faster and louder than upper class people. In Spanish, upper class people tend to lend the final S of the plurals. They say, or like, and working class people tend to not to pronounce the last syllable. Maybe you are noticing that I'm doing this in English too. So, the last syllable we tend to not to pronounce it. So when you speak, people can people know what class are you from, what so this is yeah, for me this was important to be also in the book, no? Because the book is a lot about class and a lot about class violence and how class violence reproduces itself generation after generation, and you work for the same people that your father worked and your grandfather worked, no? In a small village, also, especially you know the family, no? In big cities, you maybe don't know the rich families, no? For example, I live in Barcelona, and I don't go to the neighborhoods, to rich neighborhoods, to rich restaurants where rich people go, no? But in a small village, you know them and you live near them, no? And it's the relation is closer, but also you see them very often, and maybe you are angry to see them and to see how rich they are, no? And how this class violence never changes, never ends, no? When I was writing Woodworm, I found a paper from a study from the University of Florence. They have studied the rich families in Florence, and they have found that are the same. They have been the same the last the last 500 years. So the same families the rich families in Florence are the same the last 5 centuries, no? And in Spain it's like that too, no? So this idea of how class violence repeats itself, is very important in Woodworm, because this is the story of my family.
It's also the story of the country, which you make clear. So there are these two rich families that the grandmother and granddaughter work for. The one that's central to the book is the Jarabos. And you let us know in this very subtle way, you just drop a little mention of how they used to go to parties with Franco. And I wonder, I mean, it's very relevant to us right now to think about authoritarianism. But I wonder if you could talk about why you put that mention of Franco explicitly in the book.
Yeah, this rich family is a real family. It was a political decision to put their name, the real name, in the book, because this family get richer with the dictatorship because they were very close to the dictator himself. And the father of this Jarabo was, I think, I'm not sure if he was the last, but he was one of the last minister of justice with Franco during the dictatorship. So he was responsible of the repression of the last years of the dictatorship. And when the democracy came in Spain, where the people from the responsible of the dictatorship were never brought to trial, never went to jail, anything. So for me it was a revenge to put the name there because they were, for example, one of the things that they did, this family, and they organized hunting parties to hunt people, not deers, but people, no? People who were hiding in the mountains to avoid the repression in the first years of the dictatorship when the Spanish Civil War ended. So these people who has murder, who has steal lands is never paid for what they did. A friend of mine said maybe the book is a revenge, and I like the idea of everybody knowing the name of the Jarabo. It's in Wikipedia too. But yeah, and when I published the book in Spain, they interview journalists interviewed me in a very famous radio station in Spain, and this was my first interview, and I'll say it as a joke, but not so joke, that I hope Jarabos don't denounce me because their name is there in the book. And the next day, I received an email from an association there that searches mass graves in Spain, because Spain is the second country in the world with the most mass graves after Cambodia. And this association try to find mass graves and trying to unbury the bodies and give to their families. And they wrote an email to me and said, "Don't worry, because the association have lawyers. So you can say whatever you want. You have a lawyer for free." And okay, I'm going to say their name, the Jaraba's name, in all the interviews. So here I am saying their name.
That's great. And there are, I mean, those mass graves are present throughout the book, but really what is most present throughout the book is revenge. I want to be careful about giving things away for anyone who hasn't yet read Woodworm, because I think anyone who hasn't read it is going to be reading it on the Metro home. But without saying what the revenge is, was it fun to write a book that was totally about revenge?
Yeah, I love revenge as a reader also, and also this I like a lot the long-term revenge. No, when you are 20 years thinking in your revenge, it's going to be fun. And yeah, I am. For me, the revenge was important because when I wrote Woodworm, I wanted to give to the women of my family the opportunity to change their stories. So fiction is it was in they couldn't revenge in get revenge in reality, you know. So we have fiction to change. It's and for me it was a little present, no, for them that at least in my book you are going to take your revenge, to get your revenge, no. So yeah, this was important to me to write this end and not the real ending, no, of the women of my family.
Well, something that's good about fiction too is that the big revenge at the end of the book is, I mean, it is really awful. And if it were a true story, it would be an awful story. But in fiction, it's satisfying. But that's a really risky thing that you did. Like, you wrote this big bad revenge that could have turned readers totally against your characters. And for me, it didn't. And I mean, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but like, I'm a mom of a little kid. And the fact that I was with the revenge all the way means you really pulled it off. Were you thinking as you wrote, oh my God, this is so risky?
No, and I didn't think in that when I wrote it. And but then when I sent the manuscript, the first draft, to people to read it before sending to the publishing house. Some people said to me, "Oof, the end is hard. This is hard to read. Maybe it's not for everybody." But I think I did it well because I convinced everyone that this revenge is okay. So and the characters are not cruel. They have the right to do it. No? So maybe I did it okay. No?
I think so. I think you did. And there's actually, well, so there's that big revenge, but there's other forms of revenge that these women take throughout the book through more occult means. So the grandmother, well, do you want to start by just telling the audience a little bit about the grandmother and her saints, and where the book's version of Catholicism comes from?
Yeah, in this area, it is in the center of Spain. Is very poor. It's very isolated. It's not far from Madrid. In fact, it's like 200 kilometers. But it has a story of isolation of the population because of poverty and also a story of repression because this area was maybe I have to explain the historical context a bit because the Spanish Civil War was like a prologue to the Second World War. Because the same forces confronted each other. On one side, fascists, and on the other side, leftists, Democrats, communists, anarchists. But in Spain, fascists won. So we had a dictatorship that lasted 40 years. And this area, the people from this area resisted the fascists, the army, until the end of the war. So it was in this area the repression was especially cruel and especially bloody, and is full of mass graves and is full of disappear people that are not going to appear because a lot of years have passed and they are not going to appear anymore. So this is a ghost. No? In the Western tradition, a ghost is somebody who has died a violent death, and also has business unresolved. No? This is the classic idea of a ghost. And for me, the village and the mountains that surround the village are full of ghosts because they died in a violent death and because the dictatorship is unresolved, no? Because still it's a national trauma in Spain. Only 3 years ago, the dictator, the body of the dictator was moved from the big mausoleum he built from himself to a normal tomb, no? Only 3 years ago. And the dictatorship ended in 1978. So still is in the political debate, it's a open bond in Spain. So the ghosts are still there, no? And it's very funny in Spain. The people who is a fan of these supernatural events, no, that record psychophonies, all the haunted places in Spain, all the people who record psychophonies are related with the civil war or with the dictatorship. In Spain, we don't have ghosts from the 18th century, like in Scotland. No, are all of them from the dictatorship and from the civil war. So it is whether this is true or not. What this is saying is that the war never ended. No, it's like a trauma, no, a national trauma, and also. This with what has to do with politics, but also because of the isolation in that area, there are death culture different from other areas. And for example, there are these idea of aparecidos, relatives, that appears to you in your bedroom usually at night, because they need to say something to you. No? Sometimes it's only, I'm okay, don't worry. If you are grieving, for example, no, they say, don't worry, I'm okay. Sometimes they ask you for a mass, for example, and sometimes they do have something unresolved and wanted to resolve. And this is very common in that area, no? Especially for old people. Young people don't believe in that kind of things. We are losing these traditions. I also putting in the book was a way to preserve it, because we are losing that kind of now anybody believes on that, but this culture, death culture, is still very, has a strong presence still in houses, in families, no? Also, for example, in Almodóvar films, Almodóvar is also from La Mancha. The film Volver. It's
In English, it's also Volver.
There is an aparecido in that film, so it's is not so strange that my grandmother, for example, is when you go to her house, she says, "Don't go to the bedroom now if you don't want to see my sister." Her sister dead 5 years ago. So, oh no, I'm not going to go there. Don't worry, I'm going to stay here. So it's not strange there.
Well, in the book, the grandmother is she has a very close relationship with the aparecidos, with the ghosts. For the whole town, really, she's connecting them to the dead and to, the next world, you might say, to everything that haunts the house. And she is also not averse to asking the dead for some help. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the curse that the grandmother casts.
This is also a thing that not my grandmothers, but my great grandmothers did, and my grandmother remembers it. There is a lot of different spells, curses, no? As a part of this death culture, or that is mixed with Catholicism, because the women of my family didn't think of in of themselves as witches, no, because they are Catholic. So for them, witches are not, but they are, yeah, they are casting a cards, but they don't think it is they are witches, no, because you ask a saint for helping you with your job or with headaches, and you ask for a car too, no? It's all mixed. Um, yeah, and they have a lot, and I put some of them in the book. But for example, I can teach you.
Please.
It could be helpful. One of the, for example, one of cars for this is low intensity cars. For example, for a coworker that gossips about you, no, something like that, and it's very cheap. So it is important too. You don't need a lot of things. You only need a handful of salt. And you have to whisper to the salt. You have to say to the salt what you need and the name of this person. For example, a coworker. Please, to the salt, no? You say his, her name, and you say, please, make sit gossip about me, no? And you have to throw it. You have to spit on it, and then throw it near the door of the house of this person, or near, for example, the table, if he or she is a coworker, near their table. So if you tomorrow find salt in the in the floor, you know that these cars. And the other one that is very important in the book is one made with you need a piece of cloth, and you have to put inside this bag. You make a bag with this. Inside this, something from the person you want to curse. For example, a lock of hair, but it might be a crime. So you can use a picture of this person, or you can use something that this person wears, and you put inside. When you close this bag with 3 notes, and you ask your favorite saint. I know you don't have saints here, but you can borrow Santa Gema, so, the saint of the book and the saint of my family, Saint Gemma. And you ask her to help you with the cars, and you make 3 knocks, and when with each note you say, please Santa Gema, please help me. And then you have to bury this little bag in a crossroads. Crossroads are a dangerous place in folk tales. No, it's mirrors, crossroads. No, the salt also is something that repeats in a lot of folk tales and a lot of tradition. No, you have to bury it in a crossroads and left there. But you have to choose. This is a very powerful card, so you have to choose you don't. You have to to choose the person, and because if you are, for example, you are being selfish, and this person doesn't have anything wrong, in fact, this damage returns to you. So it's only for people, for very bad people. You have to be careful with the person you choose and the reasons you have, to cast the cards.
Well, I will say that in the book, the curse does not rebound. It goes where it's supposed to. And I will also say that maybe I'm Jewish, but I might still borrow Santa Hema and do some cursing. All right. Well, I want to let others ask questions. I don't want to hog all of the question asking time myself. So let me just tell you what, I'll ask one more question, and anyone else who knows their question already should feel free to start lining up at the mic. I will say I used to work in events before I did events, and if you do comment as a question, I will give you the mean event stare, and tell you to ask a question. But please line up with your questions now. And the last question that I want to ask you is something we've gotten at, but I want to really hear it. What is the role that these two women, the grandmother who casts her curses and the granddaughter who's not sure where she fits in the world yet, what role did they play in their community? Because they're outcasts, but they're not. And I'd love you to wrap up by talking about that before we go to the audience.
Yeah, they are isolated from the neighbors, and they are outcasts. The neighbors hate them but also need them, and at night they go to the house to ask them a card or to ask them for help with something, no? So but yeah, I think this is very common with women, especially that are different, or that don't follow what patriarchy, says that you have to do, or don't follow gender. I don't know how to say it in English. Mandatos de género.
Yeah, gender norms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like we as a culture need women like that.
No.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone want to come ask the first question?
In in New York, one person asked me about the humor in the book.
It is very funny.
Yeah, but this is strange for me because I was very angry when I wrote the book. You can notice if you read it, I think. But then I read an interview of Jordan Peele, and he said that the only difference between a horror movie and a comedy movie is the soundtrack. And yeah, and I think it's true. They are humor and horror very close. In
Yeah.
fact, no?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
The generation of women in your story seem to have very different relationships with the families that they work for and how they see themselves within their community. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose those kind of very, in some senses, very extreme differences with how they were relating to the world outside of them and the consequences of that? I don't want to get too spoilery.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the two main characters, the grandmother and the granddaughter, are very angry entre ellas,
At each other.
at
Yeah.
each other at the beginning, but then I think they understand that they don't have to be angry with the other, but with the responsible of the violence, no, with the men of the family and with the rich families, no. So I think they, or at least this was what I was trying to do as when I was writing it. They learn to to rely the one in confiar la una en la otra.
Yeah, they learn to trust each other.
Trust each other, and yeah, because I think this is very common with when you if you don't have you don't read about feminism, for example, you have misogyny, because in a patriarchal society, women are also misogynist if you don't if you don't realize that if you don't read about it, you don't hear the feminists, no, you don't learn that the responsible of the violence are not you. And this pass also this happens also with class, no? If you don't know that these are structural problems, you maybe blame yourself for your poverty, no? And you think that I have to I have to put more effort in my work, and so I'm going to be, no, this is my fault. I'm not enough. I'm not rich because I'm not enough, no? And you have to understand, no? You have to realize that it's a structural problem. It's not your fault, no? And I think they try to along the story, no, they try to, or they understand this, no, and they begin to work and to work together and to work together against the responsible of the violence.
I mean, you could say that one of the things that haunts women is the patriarchal voice inside, and one of the things that haunts these women in the book is the ghost of the patriarch inside the house, which I think is just so smart on your part.
Yeah, feminism is like an exorcism sometimes, because you have to take out the patriarchal voice inside you, you know? So yeah, it's, patriarchy is horror. It's very close to horror too. Not only humor,
Yes.
patriarchy too.
Hi. So there's obviously in your story, there's a lot of the family generational trauma that's kind of passed around. And you kind of touched about how this is like the story of your family. So I'm curious, like, how did your family react to this story, and how did they take it? Was it kind of a catharsis for them, or how did they feel about their story being told and the trauma that was passed along there?
Thank you. Yeah, my grandmother, when I was to this big radio station, she hasn't read the book because she's very old and she can't read anymore. But she heard this interview in the radio, and when I went to her house the next day, she said to me, she was upset because it was like she said to me, you are telling the secrets of their family there. The ropa sucia is dirty laundry.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very similar. You are telling our dirty laundry there in a radio station. Everybody is going to know our secrets, our story. And then my father wants to sell tickets for a tour house. So, and he's jealous because he wants to tell the story of his family. He wants me to tell the story of his family. But the problem is that his family was on the fascist side. They volunteered to the fascist army. So so they are going to be, I'm going to write about them, I think, in the future, but they are going to be the bad ones.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Hi, I loved your book. So I noticed like a lot of the horror that you write about here is like like there's a lot of social horror, but what I wanted to ask, because a lot of the writing has to do with like conventions of horror and supernatural, but do you consider yourself a horror writer? And if you do or do not, do you think like the next work you're gonna write will be also a horror novel, or is it gonna lean more social, or do you think that there has to be a dichotomy between those things?
Thank you. Yeah, I think horror is a good moment for horror now. For example, in Spanish speakers writers, no, Latin American writers, not in Spain, because in Spain we don't have horror tradition. But in Latin America there are a lot of fantasy tradition, magic realism. I don't want to say magic realism because now everything is magic realism. If you write in Spanish and you write something, a ghost, or you put a ghost, or you put a spell, no, in your book, this is going to be magic realism. No? So, and in fact, this press publisher who said that kind of things to sell more books. I don't think I like horror. I am a big fan of horror since I was a teenager. So for me, it's also I feel comfortable in this genre. Not only because I think the story of my family is a horror story and the story of this area, but also because I think horror is very useful for writers because of this codification, no? These codes. For example, no? With ghosts, if you put a ghost in a story, the readers are going to know. You don't need to explain that this person has died of a violent death, no, or that have business unresolved. No, the readers are already know then. No, so you have a lot of layers, no, in your story, and horror stories. I think are it is very interesting how you can read the story, but you can see also the different layers. For example, no, horror has been very critic with the family as an institution, no? A lot of movies, a lot of books tells how family could be dangerous, could be violent, no? The relationship inside the families. So I think the next book is going to be horror, horror too.
Okay. So this is your first fiction novel. You've written nonfiction before, so I'm curious about what the experience has been like shifting over to fiction, and also if you have a preference for nonfiction versus fiction.
Yeah, for me, I think for me, fiction is more difficult to write because non-fiction, you have, for example, you're writing of a character, historical character, and he did incredible things. I don't know how to say it. Nonsense things, but it was reality, so you don't have to convince the reader that it is true. No? It was what happened, but in fiction, you have this problem, no, of credibilidad. I don't know.
Yeah, credibility.
Very similar. No, you have to convince the readers that it could happen. No. And sometimes it is, for me, it's more difficult than essays.
Yeah, which with horror or anything that stretches the bounds of reality, that seems even harder to me because you have to get the reader to buy your reality. And then within that reality, make everything credible.
Yeah, this verosimilitud, or maybe
same in English.
it's more difficult in fiction than in non-fiction, because in non-fiction, you don't have to care about that. No?
You want to sign some books?
Yeah, of course.
Layla, thank you so much for coming to DC. This was a treat for me. I think it was a treat for everyone. I'm so happy you were here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.